There now follows an election broadcast on behalf of the Labour Party.
"3 days to go. And before Harold Wilson speaks from Manchester, a few words from Lord Attlee.
I see Sir Alec Hume an independent deterrent. Now it's odd, you know. I never felt like that. Nor did Mr. Ernest Bevin. And of course Ernest Bevin was a great personality. As a matter of fact, this idea of the independent deterrent is nonsense. It's the same order of things as the defence of the Conservatives under Neville Chamberlain on national defence. There was no such thing as national defence. We should be stronger if we had a nuclear weapon. Is absolute nonsense. They cannot tell me of any possible occasion in which we ourselves, independently, should want to use a nuclear weapon, or how you could use it as a threat. You have two enormous countries, Russia and the United States. They have the deterrent. The more danger there is, they're falling in the hands of some trigger-happy fool. You have France wanting it, China wanting it. Kind of every self-respecting person must have his own bomb. Well, if a man had any personality, he could put across British policy without a nuclear bomb in his hand.
We vote on Thursday. We're deciding the future of our country. We're deciding the well-being of our people and of our children. We're deciding whether we're going to go on trailing behind other countries, or whether, as we believe, Britain can around. But if we're going to assert ourselves, this means we must have economic strength at home. For if we stand still at home, we stand still abroad. But it's not only a question of restoring a sense of economic purpose to our national affairs and getting Britain on the move again. Which can combine efficiency with new vigor in our economic life, but also which can ensure that the prosperity of the nation is shared by every family. Why is there a choice? There are deep differences in policies first. But more important, there's a basic Roosevelt said once, better the occasional faults of a government living in the spirit of compassion than the consistent omissions of a government frozen in the ice of its own indifference. And the Labour Party, which sprang from the people, is concerned about people, people as individuals, people as families. Our opponents approach the problem of government in a much more materialist way. For them, the supreme test is how well business is doing, how high is the level of profits, how a stock exchange price is doing, because they believe in the old Victorian idea that the profit and loss account is the sole criterion of the national welfare. That the man who makes money, however he makes it, is more highly esteemed than the man who earns his money, producing for his fellow men or providing the necessary services on which a civilized society depends. In this election, we're choosing a government for the next 5 years. which is content with second best, which will abdicate responsibility in favor of those who owe no sense of accountability to the national interest, whose only concern is with their own private gain. We reject this one-sided and selfish approach. We seek to create an open society is matched by a sense of purpose. We believe that government by the people must be by the whole people, and that you can't talk of political democracy if there's no economic democracy. When I fly the Atlantic in a jet plane, I want to know that the pilot of that aircraft is highly skilled at his job, concerned with the safety of his passengers. Your operation. All you care about is whether the surgeon knows his job. You don't want to know if he mixes with the right circles or has the right friends. And you know, when it's a question of our strength and independence, we want to feel that those who are deciding what we produce, what we invest, or how we're going to crack open tough export markets are men trained for the job. In a world of tough professionals, and we can't go on as we have been doing. Let's look at the two parties' philosophies against the issues with which we're faced, because it's this fundamental approach that lies at the heart of all the issues that dominate this election this week. Land prices, housing, the cost of living, pensions, education. Take land prices. To the community at an exorbitant profit, you're honored as a smart operator. And you know, the Conservatives glory in a system which enables our urgent housing needs to be exploited by a handful of privileged men who have perhaps inherited vast landed possessions, or by speculators who've moved in and bought land in the hope of a quick profit. Millions have been made. Or your mortgage payments. We believe that the land of Britain should be used for the benefit of the people of Britain, not for private profit. And where new building pushes up land values, the increase in value should come to the community and be used for the benefit of the whole community. That is why we're going to take urgently required building land into public ownership. Their homes. And the Tories, with the Rent Act, have enabled unscrupulous landlords to exploit the housing shortage, even to the point of creating rackmanism. We believe that the government should act to help owner-occupiers by lowering interest rates, and of course help them by providing cheaper land. That families paying rent should be able to live in their homes without being held up to ransom by private landlords. So one of our first acts will be the repeal of the Rent Act. We shall restore security of tenure. (1948), and their concern for the profits of middlemen has meant that year by year the gap has been widening between what the farmer gets for his produce and what the housewife has to pay. For the Labour Party, you know, the cost of living is not just a question of economic management. It's a matter of living, or just barely existing, for old-age pensioners and others living on small fixed incomes. The Conservatives' treatment of the pensioners reveals all increase the weekly pension by about £0.50 a week each year, less than the current rise in the cost of living. And Sir Alec Douglas Hume talks on television of these pathetic increases in pensions as donations. But this is not a subject for charity. Old age pensioners are entitled to live in conditions of dignity and comfort as a right, as members of our national family, for whom they've done so much. This is why I pledge the Labour government to urgent action to deal with this problem. Without the need to go cap in hand to the national assistance. It's the same with education. As Democrats, as socialists, we believe in the right of every boy and girl to educational opportunity which will develop their talents to the full, develop their abilities to get the best out of life and to put the best into life. But that isn't all. We believe in Britain, and in this ruthlessly competitive age in which we live, our best brains are our finest asset. We are faced with the formidable industrial and with this kind of challenge, we can't as a nation afford to neglect the development of a single child. But once again, it's all a question of priorities, of what we think is important. However dedicated a nation's teachers, they can't do the job they want to do if classes are overcrowded, as they are all over Britain. But teachers stand low in the Tory scale of values, much lower than many others who contribute nothing to the country's welfare. And you don't get fair educational opportunity of segregation in our schools, where the 11 plus cuts off 3/4 of all our boys and girls from almost any hope of higher education. To deal with these problems, we've put forward our ideas and plans for creating a new Britain. They say that it can't be done, that we can't afford it, that it's beyond our grasp. What they mean is that they can't do it. They won't do it. And on the basis of the halting, limping, faltering Tory record of the past 13 years, strain ourselves. You know, this is the language of defeat. We believe this country can do it. We can do it if we get away from the sterile waste of stop-go-stop, pay-pause policies. If we get a new sense of urgency into industry. If we harness the tides of scientific and technological advance. If we can get both sides of industry to shed their addiction to out-of-date practices to which they cling because they fear the consequences of change. We've got to rediscover and recapture the spirit of adventure. So this is the choice that we face on Thursday. If you're content to settle comfortably into a standard of living which is rising, not rising as much as it ought to be rising, if you're content to see this country sink into a rut of cozy complacency, if you feel that we mustn't reach out to heights that are within our grasp, if you feel that as things are, they must remain, if you think that Britain's role in the world depends upon our ancient monuments and nuclear posturing, if you're satisfied with a stop-go-stop seesaw, which is the Tories' substitute for real economic planning, then your choice is clear. You stick with the Tories. Lloyd George once said, and President Kennedy repeated it in his election 4 years ago, a tired nation is a Tory nation. But if you want to see Britain moving ahead and getting ahead, if you want to sweep away outmoded ideas, the old boy network that has condemned so many of our ablest young people to frustration, if you want to see that at every level of our national life, talent and ability are recognized and given their head, then you will feel with us the sense of challenge and of excitement and adventure. For if the past belongs to the Tories, the future belongs to us, all of us. Isn't the choice that we're making this? That we want the children for whom all of us are voting to look back and to say that these were the great days. This was the moment when the people of Britain said, enough is enough. When they decided to take their future and the future of our country into their own hands. This is what we shall be voting about on Thursday.
That was an election